Yesterday we had a marathon session, went on until 9:30 instead of stopping at 9 o'clock. And Vijayan Bhai's recording got a little upset. Now, I can't recapture all that I said during the last half an hour, but the nearest I could come to is probably read that passage once again, since the discussion is fresh in our minds. This is on page 59. I'll just read it and then say a little bit about it and then connect it to another passage which develops the whole idea. Alive in a dead rotating universe, we whirl not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. Even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. It is near us, in unnumbered bodies and births. In its unslackening grasp, it keeps for us safe the one inevitable supreme result no will can take away and no doom change, the crown of conscious immortality, the Godhead promised to our struggling souls, when first man's heart dared death and suffered life. One who has shaped this world is ever its Lord. Our errors are his steps upon the way. He works through the fierce vicissitudes of our lives. He works through the hard breath of battle and toil. He works through our sins and sorrows and our tears. His knowledge overrules our nescience. Whatever the appearance we must bear, whatever our strong ills and present fate, when nothing we can see but drift and bail, a mighty guidance leads us still through all. After we have served this great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. A date is fixed in the calendar of the unknown, an anniversary of the birth sublime. Our soul shall justify its checkered walk. All will come near, that now is not or far. This was the passage which we concluded with, and as I pointed out, this passage gives us the courage to live no matter how bad the circumstances look. Because if there is a God, he must be constantly at work on all of us, because we are basically his responsibility. And therefore, ultimately, a believer in God must come to the conclusion that there is nothing like chance. There are things he doesn't understand, and it's only natural you don't understand God's intentions, God's overall plan, because God doesn't just think of you and me, he has to think of the entire creation, and not just for 5 years or 10 years or 80 years, but for billions and billions of years he has been shaping this world. And so it's quite possible that we don't understand. There are many things that happen to us that happen to the world outside. We are baffled, we are hurt, we don't know how to relate them, how to understand them. And I don't think reading the Gita or reading Savitri necessarily immediately reduces your pain. The suffering and pain are there because whatever you read is here. It is in your mind. And the mind we don't live lives at the mental level. We live lives primarily at the physical level and the vital level. And so as a result you see the most intelligent man is capable of the most stupid mistakes, because when he acts, the dynamism for his life doesn't come from the mind. If it is somebody else's problem, he can analyze it beautifully. We can always guide other people. We can't guide ourselves, because when we guide other people, it's our mind that is functioning. When it comes to us, it is our vital being that is functioning, it is our physical that is functioning. And from there, all the impulses from action come. And that is why knowing the Gita by heart or knowing all the Vedas and Upanishads does not necessarily come to your aid when you are yourself hauled over the burning coal of life. Very often we have to go through all this. But if you have it somewhere at the back of your mind, this faith, this belief, because things happen to us, they test our belief. And if we have this somewhere in our mind, when we are totally desperate, we have nothing else to clutch, a passage like this, or some of the wonderful verses of the Gita, enable us to keep fighting, hold on to life and not just give it up. That's the reason, as I read this, and as you can see, as sitting here after supper, fine summer evening, it's very nice to read this, understand this, but there is no guarantee that will necessarily come to your mind and help when you are yourself facing the toughest battles of life. One has to face them, one has to go through them. One can't live life second hand. When pain comes to you, you have to yourself go through all this. But pain itself, you will see later on, is a habit we have formed. See, ultimately, all the Upanishads and the Vedas and everybody says this world came out of God's joy. So everything that happens here, every touch of nature, every touch that comes from outside should give you joy and happiness. But it doesn't. Only certain things give us happiness and most things give us pain. That's because our life has lost the capacity to respond to these things in a particular way. And a yogi is a person who can respond to it. Sri Aurobindo has a poem where he talks about a scorpion bite. One night he was bitten by a scorpion, and he calls it the lover's kiss. As a yogi, he said, I wanted to convert this, this terrible pain of a scorpion's bite into its opposite, into bliss. If you have that kind of a capacity, life hardly ever gives you any pain. Everything it brings you waves of bliss and happiness, but we are not there. We are still at the animal level. Our vital is at the animal level. Our physical being is at the animal level. But something in us, called the mind, the mental consciousness, is clearer. It can understand this. It can debate over this. It can console other people. But the consciousness itself from which we live is not of that kind. In these matters, I very often tell a little story. There used to be a Mahatma in a small village, and whenever people had any problems, they would rush to this Mahatma for advice, for consolation. Like, you lost your cow, or, one of your properties caught fire, or there was some very serious illness, something of that kind. Tragedies do take place, and people used to rush to him. And he would console everybody and send everybody, if not completely at peace with themselves, but somehow they felt much better after meeting him. He had a disciple, he had a chela, and he was saying, now I have been with my master for so long, and I have seen him treat people afflicted by various kinds of maladies, and exactly I know what he says. It's like, doctor saying, prescribing remedies. So he says, why not I start this business? I know if somebody comes and says, my grandchild is no more, please do something about it, then my guru used to say such and such a thing. Then somebody says, my wife is very seriously ill, or she has, lost something, Then he was to such and such thing. I know the remedies for all these things. Why not me become the guru? Everybody wants to be a guru. And this Mahatma realized that this man is haunted by this ambition of becoming a guru. So one day they were sitting like this, and a farmer was coming, almost crying, weeping because he had lost a cow or a buffalo or something, oxen or something. And he came, and this Mahatma says to his disciple, "I'm not feeling too well this evening. Why don't you take over? I'll take rest." So he goes in, and this disciple says, "At last my turn has come." So he sits in the chair exactly as his guru used to sit, at the same angle, same posture. And the farmer comes and he asks the farmer the same questions the guru used to ask. And the farmer begins to narrate, his story of woe, sobbing and crying. What can I do, a poor man like me? If, of the 2 oxen I have, one is gone, how do I plow the field next rainy season? This kind of thing. I'm completely ruined. Starts crying. Then this man tries to recall, what exactly did my master say in occasions like this? He knows the whole thing by heart. So he starts saying this. Exactly as the guru would say, in a kind of grave, serious voice, he talks about it. And the more he goes on talking about it, this man's crying becomes louder and louder. Exactly the opposite effect that he used to have in the guru's case. When the guru says, after some time, people used to feel at peace with themselves, some kind of reconciliation used to come. But when this man says exactly the same words, it aggravates this man's feeling of loss. Then he realizes it is not the words that the guru used to say, it is something of his consciousness he used to impart through these words. So all these words that I say, or anybody says, are basically words. What has to happen is your consciousness has to be able to rise to this level. But intellectual understanding, emotional understanding helps. These things are a help. That's why I generally make it a point to read passages like this. The central point I would like to emphasize here once again is that if you try to read any meaning, any consistent meaning in the happenings, in the surface happenings of your life, your successes, your defeats, your glories, your humiliation, all these things, if you try to relate them, you do not see any pattern at all. You wonder why these things are happening to me. Where am I supposed to go? Is there any rule of law? Is there any God? If he is a God, what kind of law book does he have? What kind of book is there by which he governs human lives? Then I'll read out a passage where Aurobindo says, the external happenings come to you because of an internal need. It is the need of your soul that determines what has to happen to you. So according to you, according to your mental calculation, you have prepared for success and success has to come. But the soul grows through success and defeat, goes through triumph and failure. Both these experiences are necessary. If we ask the mind will never choose defeat. The mind will never choose humiliation. The mind will always choose success. The mind will always choose victory. The mind will always choose triumph. But our soul is not attached to this. The soul is attached to the experience, and all experiences enable us to grow. And that's why the outer life, the happenings in the outer life are basically determined by the need of the inner life. Now this is something we very often find it difficult because we don't know there is an inner life, for one thing. We don't realize that there is something growing within us, the spirit or the soul or whatever. That also we don't. We occasionally say there is God in us and everybody. That's just a matter of speaking. But we never really act as if there is a God sitting in us. And we never act as if this God and the enrichment of this God, bringing this God to the front, is the primary purpose of our life. We don't think of this at all. We begin by assuming we are a body. Body's comfort, the comfort of the vital, the comfort, everything, the name, fame, everything that comes to the body, and this is what I should live for. This is what we really feel. But gradually, slowly you realize that there is no happiness in the finite. There is only happiness in the infinite. It is very, very difficult to come to this conclusion. In the Upanishads it is said, Nalpe sukhamasti. In the alpa, in the finite, there is never any happiness. The alpa, the satisfaction of the finite, may give you some comfort for some time. Then you get used to it. The whole thing begins to turn dry, you lose interest in it, then you try for something else, then something else, then something else. This goes on. Because sitting here within each one of us is a representative of the infinite. And this infinite can only be satisfied by finding an infinite outside myself. So infinite can only be satisfied by the infinite, but we try to satisfy the infinite with the finite. And that is why no matter where you go, no matter what victories you gain, you can never remain satisfied forever and ever. It is only in the infinite, in the Bhauma, that's what the Upanishads say, in the Bhauma, in the large, in the infinite, is happiness. This is something we do not realize, and that is why we very often consider certain lives failure, certain lives success. From the point of view of the growth of the soul, there is nothing like a life that is a failure. All lives, by virtue of the fact that they are here on earth and they have gone through all these various stages, various experiences. As I said, we are all, whether you like it or not, yogis. This is a yoga of nature. Growth of consciousness is the central secret of our life, the central secret of this whole world. And so this is how we participate in this. Now this is the central thing. I'll read out one or two other passages which talk about the same basic idea. Let us go back briefly to a passage I read before earlier on. I just don't want to comment on it. One of the things I'm doing is, in spite of Vijay Bhai's suggestion that there are copies of Savitri, if you like, you can consult them. I have not driven you to copies of Savitri because I have not been reading enough from Savitri. So maybe I should read today a little more so that you begin to get addicted to the Savitri, the verse. That is the whole idea. So I'll read this passage about meditation. Not so much to comment on it, but it leads on to something else. This is from page 47, the last 2-3 lines. Remember, in moments when the inner lamps are lit and the life's cherished guests are left outside, our spirit sits alone and speaks to its gulfs. Then what happens? A wider consciousness opens then its doors, invading from spiritual silences. A ray of the timeless glory stoops a while to commune with our seized, illumined clay, and leaves its huge white stamp upon our lives. In the oblivious field of mortal mind, revealed to the closed prophet eyes of trance, or in some deep internal solitude, witnessed by a strange immaterial sense, the signals of eternity appear. We hear what mortal ears have never heard. We feel what earthly sense has never felt. We love what common hearts repel and dread. Our minds hush to a bright omniscient. A voice calls from the chambers of the soul. We meet the ecstasy of the Godhead's touch in golden privacies of immortal fire. If you go in within yourself and realize that there is a spirit, there is a spark of the divine, and how beautifully he describes it on page 49, about 6-7 lines from the top. a treasure of honey in the combs of God, a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak. It is our glory of the flame of God. Glory of the flame of God abides in each one of us. The purpose of meditation, the purpose of spiritual life is not to just be good, virtuous. The purpose of all that is to be aware of this presence and bring that presence to the flower. And he says it's a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak. It's like a splendor burning, tenebrous, dark, in a dark cloak. It is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight. Once you have an experience of it, even for a fraction of a second, in your whole lifetime, you just need one fraction of a second, the experience of this. Then you will never, never once again ever get into ignorance. You know, in the Bhakti literature, they talked about viraha, the separation from God. Why do you think they are so miserable? They are so miserable because they have experienced for a brief while this wonderful presence of the divine within them. And once you have this experience, then your life is entirely changed, and you don't want to miss that for any ever second. Radha missing Krishna's presence, This is what it is, and it is such pain because you have experienced this. And so he says, our golden fountain of the world's delight, an immortality cowled in the cape of death. So then you realize, what am I? I am an immortality who is hiding in a cape of death. Death is not me. I am basically, my nature is immortality. And temporarily, I am hiding behind death. The shape of our unborn divinity, it guards for us our fate. In depths within, where sleeps the eternal seed of transient things, always we bear in us a magic key, concealed in life's hermetic envelope. A burning witness in the sanctuary, regards through time and the blind walls of form. A timeless light is in his hidden eyes. He sees the secret things no words can speak, and knows the goal of the unconscious world and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. This is a reality. But at the level at which you and I live our lives, but all is screened, subliminal, mystical. Why do we say that there is a soul? We say there is a soul because people we have great respect for say there is a soul. We have no direct experience of it. We take the words of wisdom. People have said, Rishis have said, the Gita has said, Upanishads have said, and therefore we think there is a soul. But you and I have absolutely no experience of it. That's why he says, all is screened, subliminal, something that takes place behind our surface consciousness, mystical. It needs the intuitive heart, the inward turn. Only when you have made it a habit to observe your life inwardly, minutely, then you begin to feel there is some reality inside. It needs the power of a spiritual gaze. If you don't do it, and merely try to understand life in surface terms, he says, what does life look like? Else to our waking mind, small moment look. A goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Otherwise, if you merely look at the surface life, it looks as like it describes it, a goalless voyage. We are going somewhere. Where are we going? A goalless voyage. At best, the only certainty about life is death. How enthusiastic can you be about this journey which ends in death, which ends in old age, which ends in a state of physical being when in moving your limbs, exercising your vital functions itself becomes a challenge. Is this the goal of the journey? Is this where we are going? See, Bertrand Russell, the great British philosopher, didn't believe in God, didn't believe in soul, but in one of his essays, he is on the verge of crying out in tears. He says, if life is only to end in death, what is the meaning of all this human heroism, human idealism? If everything ends in a handful of dust, is that all there is to it. Your life and my life become meaningful no matter what our present condition and situation is, because we carry within ourselves a spark of the divine, and this spark of the divine has a destiny beyond one life. And so it's a triumphant journey of the soul from one life to another life. If that is not the reality, then life has no meaning. It doesn't really matter how you live your life. Whether you follow an honest trade or live by stealing people's wealth, it doesn't really matter, because whatever it is, the whole damn thing is going to end with death. But if there is a life after death, if you are going to come back and soul has a destiny, soul has to grow, then what you do at every moment contributes to your future's growth. So what you do, how you act is not of no consequence, it is of great consequence. And that is why life becomes meaningful, life becomes significant. When there is this whole, you begin by assuming there is a spirit, there is an inner God growing in me, but he says it is all screened, subliminal, mystical. If this is not true, as he says, else, if this is not true, to our waking mind's small moment look, a goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will. Everything seems to be a chance. And if you really look at life, you think, I don't know, I was born in such and such a village. I don't know how I came to London. I find it very difficult to believe that I can even speak English. Many of you must have said that, I was born in such a small village, I didn't know where the world is, I didn't know anything beyond Karamsad. All that I know is Karamsad, Anand, and this is all I knew. I didn't know Wembley and Hendon and so on. It's all accident. There is nothing like accident in life. You see, your soul needed this experience and you are here. Somebody's soul doesn't need that experience, he is not here. What's the point in his comparing himself with yourself? You see, everybody in every life, there is success and failure. That doesn't mean just because you come to London, everything immediately becomes rainbow colored. You have the winters here. You have here the terrible situation where you can't take casual leave. How happy we are in India. If I don't want to go to work, I just don't go to work, and tomorrow I say casual leave. Here, no, I can tell you only on Saturday evening whether I can be free on Sunday morning. That's your life here. So it all comes like this, pluses and minuses, everything comes here, and all these things are needed. If, he says, if this is not true, some chance has settled or hazarded some will, or a necessity without aim or cause. Why am I in reasonable comfort? Don't know. Why is somebody in such pain? Don't know. There is no necessity, no cause. Now, is there any pattern to any of these things? Is there somebody who looks after these things, or is it just a mad world? Or a necessity without aim or cause, unwillingly compelled to emerge and be in this dense field where nothing is plain or sure. Our very being seems to us questionable. If you really look at it, as many people ask, what are you fellows doing? In the evening, summer evening, instead of going somewhere nice, to a nice place, why do you go to this Sudbury place? One evening I can understand, evening after evening, you're going there for 15 days, wasting your time. People who have not yet understood that there is something beyond, or something which is other than the surface existence, its preoccupations. This is something, why are we here? Why am I here? Why are you here? You are here because the kind of life that you live, however comfortable it may be, it doesn't completely satisfy you. See, there is something else in life I'm missing. What is it? So you have inquiry in your mind. So you go here, you go to this satsang, that satsang. What is it I'm missing? You want to find out. That stage comes, and he says, if that is not there, in this dense field where nothing is plain or sure, our very being seems to us questionable. our life a vague experiment. The soul, if there is a soul, a flickering light in a strange, ignorant world. The earth, a brute, mechanic accident. That's what they will teach you, or they used to teach you until recently at Cambridge. This world is a brute mechanical accident. There is no God behind it. There is no creator. There is no plan. Then how did it come about? Oh, there's a Big Bang. And after the Big Bang, one after the other, all these accidents took place. And here, by accident you are here, by accident you have come here, by accident you will go home. This is all accident. There is no meaning, there is no purpose to it. The earth, a brute mechanic accident. And he said beautifully, a net of death in which by chance we live. This is a net of death, surrounded by death on all sides. And by chance we live. It's only a chance. This line very often reminds me of traffic in Indian roads. That you meet with an accident shouldn't surprise anybody, because the traffic is so crazy and each driver is so crazy that it's only by luck that you escape getting into an accident. But then, if there is somebody comes and touches your cycle or your car, he gets so angry as if it's, he can't explain it. But I find it very strange when I go out, that fact that I come without knocking somebody's auto rickshaw, cycle rickshaw, some cow, buffalo. There are all these things on the road. So we are like that. We are in a world where we are surrounded on all sides by death. And it seems to be just a chance that we happen to be alive. A net of death in which by chance we live. All we have learned appears a doubtful guess. Science says with great conviction, this is the ultimate truth. The next weekend, if you look at the Sunday supplement, somebody says, this supplement, they say, I remember in our staff room, we were once discussing sugar is very bad, nobody should take sugar, sugar is white poison. Now, there are 3 white poisons, sugar and salt and atta, this refined flour, these 3 things. So we were discussing it, and 15 days later we saw another report saying that a team of scientists, generally this happens in places like Harvard and Stanford and so on, a team of scientists have discovered a certain amount of sugar is essential for the brain to function efficiently. And what I'm trying to say is that whatever certainty we try to achieve through our mind, something else comes up and the same mind says, this is not final, this is not final. So all we have learned appears a doubtful guess. The achievement done, a passage or a phase, whose farther end is hidden from our sight. A chance happening or a fortuitous fate. Out of the unknown, we move to the unknown. Avyaktadini bhutani, vyaktamadhyani bharata. Avyakta nidhananyeva. We have come from the unknown, we are again going to the unknown. This is what life is. A chance happening or a fortuitous fate. Out of the unknown, we move to the unknown. Ever surrounded our brief existence here, grey shadows of unanswered questionings. We have so many questions that nobody seems to be able to answer all these questions. The dark, inconscient, signless mysteries stand up unsolved behind fate's starting line, etc. And then I'd like to take you to another yeah, page 52. about 6-7 lines from the top. But few can look beyond the present state or overleap this matted hedge of sense. All that transpires on earth and all beyond are parts of an illimitable plan the one keeps in his heart and knows alone. Everything that happens in this world, he says, all that transpires on earth and all beyond are parts of an illimitable plan. It's a part of a plan. The one keeps in his heart, the one, the creator, has created this plan, has made this plan, and knows alone. And then he says, our outward happenings. This is a very, very significant line. Our outward happenings have their seed within. Outward happenings are not caused by a precedent outward happening. Cause and result, we always look for cause and result, and the cause very often seems to be so insignificant, the result seems to be so huge, and you wonder why the small, cause brought about such a big result. But then he says, our outward happenings have their seed within, and even this random fate that imitates chance, this mass of unintelligible results, are the dumb graphs of truths that work unseen. If you look at your life outside, you will feel that our fate, we call chance, destiny, looks like a random. Even this random fate that imitates chance, this mass of unintelligible results, are the dumb graph of truths that work unseen. The laws of the unknown create the known. The events that shape the appearance of our lives are a cipher of subliminal quiverings. What really causes the surface events are the movements which are subliminal to us, are the movement of the soul, are the movement of the spirit. It is these that determine the outer happenings. So if you want to find out why a certain thing has happened, do not look for its reason in the surface of your life. Look for the reason within yourself. Because ultimately, this is not the journey of your body. This life is a journey of your soul. And everything happens as is required for the soul's progress, and not your material progress. For us, life's success is determined by certain outer symbols. Your wealth, your name, and the comfort within which you can keep your family, etc., people you love, these are the things by which we measure the success of our life. But really speaking, these are only outward happenings. The real happenings, the real reason for our living, he says, is the inward subliminal quiverings, are a cipher of subliminal quiverings which rarely we surprise or vaguely feel, are an outcome of suppressed realities that hardly rise into material day. They are born from the spirit sun of hidden powers, digging a tunnel through emergency, but who shall pierce into the cryptic gulf and learn what deep necessity of the soul determined casual deed and consequence. What we think is a casual deed, casual consequence, this is determined by a need of the soul. He very clearly says that. And learn what deep necessity of the soul determined casual deed and consequence. Absorbed in a routine of daily acts, our eyes are fixed on external scene. Naturally, we are absorbed in the daily life, going to office, catching the train, this, that, and the other. And so our concentration, our attention is all the time on the surface happenings of life. Absorbed in a routine of daily acts, our eyes are fixed on an external sense. We hear the crash of the wheels of circumstance. Entire thing, the business collapses or whatever castles you have built, they all collapse. And he says, and wonder at the hidden cause of things. What could be the reason? I have absolutely taken nothing for granted. I worked very hard at it, and how is it that it failed? Yeah. Everything. And wonder at the hidden cause of things. Yet, a foreseeing knowledge might be ours. If we could take our spirit's stand within, you'll be able to understand the direction of your life, the meaning of things that happen to you, if you take the stand of your spirit within and not the stand of the ego, the outer perspective. Yet a foreseeing knowledge might be ours, if we could take our spirit's stand within, if we could hear the muffled daemon voice, the muffled voice of the inner spirit. Too seldom is the shadow of what must come cast in an instant on the secret sense, which feels the shock of the invisible, and seldom in the few who answer give, the mighty process of the cosmic will communicates its image to our sight, identifying the world's mind with ours. Now, please remember, all this is describing Ashwapati's yoga, part 1 of Ashwapati's yoga. Now, in here, Sri Aurobindo doesn't describe what else Ashwapati was doing, whether he was eating onions, potatoes, tomatoes, or he was avoiding any of these things, whether he was taking a bath once in a day or 3 times in a day. Nothing of this is discussed, mentioned. What are the spiritual practices? We call them spiritual practices. The real spiritual practice is this. The real spiritual practice is taking your spirit seriously and being all the time judging your life from the perspective of the inner being and not from the outer being. This is the basic spiritual attitude. For us, spiritual attitude generally, as we understand, means a set of rituals. As I said the very first day, I am not against rituals. Rituals are needed for each person, but if they are rituals, the person has himself evolved through experimentation and finds them useful. But they are useful for you. You have no business to impose them on your wife, on your sister, your brother, your children. Give them the freedom to evolve their own rituals. This should be the attitude towards rituals. Each one is made differently, and that is the central truth of the Hindu religion. That we believe, although God is formless, ultimately Shankara comes to the conclusion that Aham Brahmasmi. Now if you ask any Westerner, say, what do you think of Aham Brahmasmi? He would say the Hindus are the most egotistic people. How can you be God? God is God and you are you. You are a sinful human being. See, the Westerners always harp on sin. We are all sinners and God is the only great thing. And here Shankara says, Aham Brahmasmi. I am the Brahman. Isn't it the very height of insolence? Instead of feeling humble and so on, you feel Aham Brahmasmi. We have that. On the other hand, we have all the pujas, we have all the temples, we have 1,000 different ways. This is the wealth of the Indian spiritual tradition. As I was saying yesterday, we are now taught by the West to believe that this was all unfortunate. This was a misfortune. This is not a misfortune. This is a great heritage, a great legacy that we have. And so, although Sri Aurobindo doesn't describe, in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, whether it takes Synthesis of Yoga, Essays on the Gita, any book you take, there is no prescription. Even if you go to the ashram, people are very surprised. How is this an ashram? There is no bell for meditation. There is no bell for everybody to wake up. In all other ashrams, you have to wake up at 5 o'clock. You have to finish your bath by 5:30 and be ready for meditation. There are people in the ashram who says, we have never done any meditation. I don't need it. Each person is free to do what he wants. On the other hand, what is it? You have to do work for the ashram community. You have to keep your surroundings clean. You have, all the time be fit, physically fit. Every ashramite has a physical routine. If you go to the ashram, even people in their 90, you will find every day going up and down. This attitude one has to cultivate. And rituals, there are people who go towards God through music, some through painting, some through computers, some through this, some through that. There are various ways. So anything that you do can be an instrument of a spiritual growth. And so, when Sri Aurobindo talks about these things, it that man stuffing the nostrils. The, the whole idea behind it is worship has to start with the assumption the image that you worship is not just the image. There is behind the image the living consciousness, and you are worshipping the living consciousness. Now, if you are really worshipping the living consciousness, if your puja room is in the house, would you let any part of your house be dirty? If God were living in one of the rooms, will you not keep every room in your house sacred? Will you not all the while be thinking of the highest things? We don't do it because the puja room is a ritual. There has to be a puja room. My father had it, my grandfather had it, I should have it. That's about all. It is this that is not useful. And so, in all these 3-4 cantos that he is talking about, his own Ashwapati's own yoga, his own individual psycho-spiritual transformation, there is no description, no emphasis of what exactly Ashwapati did. And very often people ask me, Sri Aurobindo's yoga and so on. I know there are these big books, but please tell me what I am supposed to do, what time I am supposed to get up. Now what is the answer to this? Should I stand facing the east or west? As I said the other day, God is in all directions. We did about one of the saints, it is said, he went, it seems, to a mosque, and he was very tired, so he slept in the mosque with his feet towards the Mecca. And somebody came and said, what is it, you are insulting God with your feet towards Mecca? This man seems to have said, please, you are free to, pull me, push me, whatever way direction, please help me to direct my feet in a direction where there is no God. So this is what it is. So it is this feeling one has to cultivate, and all the rituals are a help and an aid towards these things. I am saying this because in Hinduism people have been divided unnecessarily on the basis of these rituals. As I said, whether God is male or female, whether God is, Shiva or Lakshmi or Saraswati, these are all various aspects of the same God. And the Vedas very clearly say all, ekam sat, vipra bahudha vadanti. They all describe it differently because we are talking about different aspects of the God. So let us make this diversity of practices, diversity of beliefs, a strength of Hinduism and not a weakness of Hinduism. We are now making it a weakness of Hinduism to divide people. There are so many ways of dividing us. The one great strength we have is this diversity of approach. But you need wisdom to use this properly. And therefore, spiritual practices can be of all kinds. I'll also tell you a small story of another great saint, and this illustrates the other thing. This saint was an Englishman. He had gone to India at a very young age. He studied philosophy at Cambridge, but somehow he was bitten by this bug of Indian spirituality. He went to Lucknow. This was in the 1920s. And a dashing, handsome young philosophy professor, philosophy in English. The entire Anglo-Indian community and the British community were all after this chap. But this man didn't want any of these things. He wanted God. He had come in India looking for God. Finally, he took sannyas. And when he took sannyas, he chose as his guru a Vaishnavi, a lady who had become turned to sannyas in the Vaishnava pattern. Now she left Lucknow and went somewhere up in the Himalayas. Now if you are in Lucknow and if you give up your job, you can still make a decent living by giving tuitions. But imagine an English professor or a philosophy professor. What kind of living can he make in a remote village in Gadwal? And so his teacher, his guru, asked him to live by begging and collecting alms. He didn't hesitate. He went round 5 houses, collecting. In those days, people used to give food when sannyasis came, so he got whatever he got, he ate it. Now much later, he established an ashram at a place called Mirtola in the Himalayas, north of Almora. Now as winter sets in, it becomes very difficult to live there, so most people come down south. So he came every year south from Mirtola. And on the way at Almora, there was this British lady who had married a Bengali Babu, and they had a nice house there, and this British lady knew this sannyasi who was, because the sannyasi also was a British. And so she had always given him this understanding that he would be most welcome any time to spend as long as he wanted in their house. And they were very comfortable, they are very well to do and so on. So the sadhu would come, and this lady, first of all, as soon as he came, he wouldn't ask for a cup of tea or anything. He would ask for some cow dung. Take some cow dung, take some water, and one room that was given to him, first of all, he will clean that room with the cow dung and water, purify it. Then he would go out to the market, buy his atta, dal, chawal, sabji, bring it home, cook it, offer it to in his puja, and then eat it. This British friend, this lady friend of his said, look, I can understand Indians doing this kind of thing. Indians are steeped in superstition, they're steeped in rituals. I can understand they're doing cow dung cleaning and so on. My house is cleaned 3 times in a day with phenyl, this, that, and the other. My house is always clean. And the food that is cooked in my kitchen is also very clean. But you won't eat any of these things. You insist on cleaning the room by yourself. You insist on not eating food cooked by anyone else but by yourself. And you are British. You are trained and educated in Cambridge. What's wrong with you? Why they are doing this? He said, Madam, I don't know what you think of me. Let me tell you, I don't care either. People who set on this journey and who reached the other bank have said that this is the path they took. So I want to reach there, so I am therefore taking their path. Once I reach there, after I reach my goal, you can ask me whether it was necessary or not, then I will tell you. But right now I don't know. For me, what is important is not public approval, is not your approval, is I want to go there. And people who have reached there have said this is the path they took, and I am taking that path. So what I am trying to say, people who follow very strict religious inhibitions, prohibitions and so on, I am not making fun of them. I think if in their case, if they think it is necessary for them, it is necessary for them. What can you do about it? You see, we are very funny people. In other countries, other religions, they have restrictions about halal and not halal and so on. It's becoming very respectable, and I see boards everywhere, halal meat sold here. Now we think it is all respectable. Government, the British government has accepted it. Now we make fun of our own fellow men who don't eat garlic. You see, I eat garlic, there's nothing wrong about that for me. But if somebody doesn't eat garlic, I must have respect for him. If somebody says, this is my way, what we do, Hindus are the first to make fun of the other chap's ways. We shouldn't be doing it. Although I know that all these things is not necessarily spiritual, but for that person it may be. So ritual is something like this. Though we pretend to be very advanced and modern and so on, if there is somebody, this saint, the British saint I was talking about, is a man called Krishna Prem. He has written very many books. He had great spiritual realizations. He died a few years ago in Mirtola. This is the way serious people take these things. And so, although Sri Aurobindo himself, as I said, does not recommend any particular ritual, he doesn't criticize rituals, he doesn't criticize puja, he doesn't criticize bhajan, although none of these is generally a part of the ashram routine. He allows people to develop their own routine, their own ritual. And therefore, although I am reading sections of the part of Savitri where he deals with Ashwapati's yoga, nothing which is generally regarded as yoga comes here. What comes here is an attitude. What comes here is the basic truths of spiritual life. What is the spiritual life? As I said the first day, spiritual life basically means within me there is a spirit. Within me there is a spark of God, and this body belongs to that spark of God. I must hand over my body, my life energies, my mind to this owner of my body. Are we doing it? If we are doing it, or if we are in the process of doing it, we are following a spiritual life. If you are not following a spiritual life, you are doing something else. This is primarily spirit and spiritual life. This understanding is very basic to Indian spirituality. And that is why we have no dogmas. That is why we are so tolerant of other religious practices. That nothing makes you a Hindu. What will make you a Hindu? If I believe in 3 things, I become a Christian. If I believe in 4 things, I become a Muslim. What is it I have to believe in to be a Hindu? Nothing. You can go and say God doesn't exist. Sankhya says God doesn't exist. So it is something, you see, I am again and again bringing this in because I have a feeling that more and more we are forgetting the strength of our spiritual tradition. This understanding of spiritual tradition is very necessary, and one of the great contributions Sri Aurobindo has made is to bring back to us an understanding of the great spirit of behind Indian spirituality. If you would like to know more about it, you should look at Sri Aurobindo's book called The Foundations of Indian Culture. It's a wonderful book where he talks about spirituality, immorality, spirituality, religion, what is the difference between all these 3 things. These are very, very necessary for our understanding. Now, I'll read another passage, partly because it's beautiful poetry, and partly because very often we believe, look at the world around us and say, the world is full of all darkness. We always believe when we are little children, we are much better than our children. We are obedient to our parents. We had good morals. We had this and we had that. What about the present generation is going to dogs? My father said the same thing about himself and me. My father said my generation was going to dogs.
And his generation was very good. I'm sure my grandfather must have said the same thing about my father. So each generation is going down. We must have hit the rock bottom a long time ago. This is not true. Uh, it is. You see, there is something called a generation gap. This is a reality. Our young people understand life in different terms. They want to deal with it in different ways. Times change, these things change, nothing remains the same forever. And so we must have an understanding of this. But the fact is, sometimes, even making for allowance to all these things, sometimes we feel life is getting very confused. Everywhere there is darkness. There doesn't seem to be any light anywhere. There doesn't seem to be any hope for mankind. These things we do feel. And at a moment like that, if you read a line like these lines, you suddenly feel there is no need to give up hope. He says on page 55, when line 3 from the top, when darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast. When darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast. This is like the night of Amavasya, when Krishna was to be born in the prison house of Kamsa. This is his mind. If you peeped into the mind of Vasudeva, you will see that he felt that the earth was all overcast with gloom, and the gloom was getting thicker and thicker. When darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast, and man's corporeal mind is the only lamp. And man has no other instrument but his mind to understand what is happening, and when he applies his mind, he finds there is no savior, there is no hope for mankind. Then what happens? As the thieves in the night shall be the covert tread. God will come into life. How will he come? Like a thief in the night. How does a thief in the night come? Noiselessly. God enters the world, he says, like a thief in the night, noiselessly. When darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast, and man's corporeal mind is the only lamp, as the thieves in the night shall be the covert tread of one who steps unseen into his house. A voice ill heard shall speak, the soul obey, a power into mind's inner chamber steal, a charm and sweetness open life's closed doors, and beauty conquer the resisting world. The truth light capture nature by surprise, a stealth of God compel the heart to bliss, and earth grow unexpectedly divine. In matter shall be lit the spirit's glow, in body and body kindle the sacred birth. Night shall awake to the anthem of the stars, the days become a happy pilgrim march, our will a force of the eternal's power, and thought the rays of a spiritual sun. Then he says, a few shall see what none yet understands. What is it? God shall grow up, while the wise men talk and sleep. God shall grow up, while the wise men talk and sleep, for man shall not know the coming till its hour, and belief shall be not till the work is done. When the work is done, everybody would like to get into the bandwagon. When the struggle is hard, when God is about to be born, pangs of birth everywhere, then man needs courage, man needs strength. Now, the reason why I read this passage, there are a number of innumerable passages like this. And one of the great attractions of Savitri is that even as poetry, it's very great poetry. I have even now a British friend in Singapore, a lady who was educated in Oxford. She once told me, I asked her, how did you get involved in the Aurobindo? She said, this is very interesting. Her husband is a very leading solicitor. He's British, but he's established practice in Singapore. This is Sonia Diane I was talking about. And she said, when my children were growing up, I used to take them for a swim to the British Club. In the beginning, I needed to sit by the pool. The children were very young, but as they grew up, they didn't need me, so I would go and spend some time talking to friends, spend some in the library. So this is 1972, Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary year. I said casually, I walked up into the library. The same Wordsworth and Keats and Byron and all these things she had read at Oxford. I didn't find anything worth reading. But somebody, he says, had pushed between set of books a little pamphlet. And somehow, aesthetically, it looked to me very ugly. Pushing this and it got crumpled and so on. So, I pulled out that pamphlet. When I pulled out that pamphlet, I saw it was a pamphlet released by the ashram or Sri Aurobindo Society, somebody on Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary. Out of mere curiosity, I started, going through these pages very quickly. First section said childhood, his education. Then talked about his political life. I was not interested in any of these things. Then he said his philosophy. He said I was not interested in philosophy. Nothing at all. Then towards the end, he said there were a couple of pages where they had quoted some excerpts from his poetry. And since she herself is very much interested in poetry, she started reading this. And he said, when I read the two excerpts, I just couldn't believe my eyes. How is it I get a degree from Oxford in English literature and I don't know somebody who writes so gloriously in English? So I just read and reread those lines. I was full of it and I started looking for any other writings of Sri Aurobindo's. And then she said, I found in the Singapore General Library only one book, Synthesis of Yoga, was found. So I used to go every day after lunch, spend 2-3 hours there, read that book, make notes, until I ran into other Indian friends who told me that there was a whole library in the Sri Aurobindo Center in Singapore. The point I am trying to make, even as poetry, it's absolutely amazing, the kind of poetry that Sri Aurobindo has produced here. And these are some of the lines. As you go along, we'll see more and more of these. Now, I just want to read one more passage here and then move on to the next section. On page 66. I often infuriate my friends in India by saying, Goddess Saraswati has adopted English as her language. Sorry, Sanskrit has lost its chance. And I personally believe that the greatest Indian thought, even today, is being produced in English. This is the requirement of the time. That doesn't mean that Sanskrit has no place. Although you'll be quite surprised to know, Indian nobody studies Sanskrit. We need time to study our state language, regional language, Gujarati. People need time to study Hindi because it's our federal language. You need English to learn, to be able to get science and so on. Sanskrit, where is time for Sanskrit? And in any case, Sanskrit is a gone case because Sanskrit is associated with Brahmins. And Brahmins are a gone race in India now. And therefore there is no time for Sanskrit. Only some women, some girls study Sanskrit, because girls, in many homes it is believed girls studying is just decorative purposes. Let them study some Sanskrit. This is how Sanskrit is gradually disappearing. At the same time, I have always found in an audience like this when I lecture, if I can quote 1 or 2 verses in Sanskrit, people are thrilled. They think I must be a great Pandit, and the reverence for me, reaches the sky. Whether I speak sense or nonsense afterward doesn't matter. But the fact that this chap can recite 2 verses, that is, there is something in us which loves and respects Sanskrit. But somehow the education is all so upside down that we have no time for Sanskrit. That's what is happening. Anyway, now the reason why I am saying all this is, the passages I am going to read now, to me, are like a modern Upanishad. Sri Aurobindo has done that. Upanishads, as you know, are very compact presentations of the great intuitions of the Rishis. Upanishads are not rational expositions. They are the bringing together, putting together of intuitive perceptions of great Rishis. And here, in line 60 and page 66, until end of page 67, the beautiful lines. And this 1.5 pages, to me, in my understanding, is a best summary of the life divine. Aurobindo has another book called The Life Divine, as you know, which is his metaphysical work, basic metaphysics. That, if one were to reduce into poetry, it would sound like this. I'll read, read this passage. The master of existence lurks in us and plays at hide and seek with his own force. In India, there is a notion of Purusha and Prakriti. This whole world, the whole creation, is supposed to be a Leela, is supposed to be a sport between Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the consciousness, Prakriti is the nature. And Purusha and Prakriti are playing in this world an eternal Rasa Krida, an eternal sport. And where is it played? It is played in the theatre of our lives. Our lives are the theatre in which Purusha and Prakriti play this eternal game. And so he says, the master of existence, the supreme divine, lurks in us. Look at the word lurks. He is not in a hurry to come out. He is there. He lurks in us and plays at hide and seek with his own force. Prakriti is his own force, executive force. You see, in the Upanishad, the supreme reality is not called either he or she. It is called it, tat tvamasi. Why do they do that? Because at this level, we transcend all categorization of human language. Now notice, human language forces you to make certain grammatical choices. Now when I want to make a sentence, I have to choose in English either between present tense and past tense. I can't avoid using tense. When I use a noun, I have to make a choice between it is a definite noun or indefinite noun, a or the. This is a requirement. In Hindi, you don't have such requirement. Right? In English, you have to say, a man came, the man was wearing such and such. You have to say a and the. This is a requirement of the English language. Similarly, when you say a person, you immediately have to declare whether it was a man or a woman. So, when we talk about God, and when you have to refer to Him, even though the sex distinction is immaterial, we are forced to say He or we are forced to say she. And the Upanishad wanted to get out of this business and said, Tat, that thou art. Now that is called Parabrahman, that is beyond even any manifestation. When the divine is ready for manifestation, the human mind can think of it as Sat, Chit and Ananda. Sat, Chit. It's not Sat and then Chit and then Ananda. They are not three things. It is Sat, that is Chit, that is Ananda. They are all three aspects of the same reality. Now, this Satchidananda, the supreme reality, wants to create, wants to bring about this creation. Now, once again, notice this is a concession to the human language. Satchidananda is what gender? So, human language is such, you say Satchidananda is he. Parabrahman is it. Satchidananda is He. Now when He wants to create, He can't create. You and I can't create. Who can create? Women can create. So He calls forth His executive power, we call it Prakriti, and that is a she. This is only what I am trying to emphasize is the fact that this is a concession to the limitation of the human language. And so, when we think of the supreme power which brings into creation, brings into birth this universe, we don't call that supreme power Holy Father, we call it Holy Mother. Because the human experience, the creatrix is the woman. So, this is Prakriti, therefore, is she, and Purusha, therefore, is he. Now, he and she at our level, and he and she at that level, it's entirely different things. But we have, if you want to communicate to human beings, it doesn't serve a purpose unless you describe it in a language, in a mode, through experiences which human beings understand. Take, for example, the idea of gopis and Krishna, Radha and Krishna. In Mahabharata, there is no reference to Radha. None at all. Even in Bhagavad, which is all the story of Krishna, the reference to Radha is minimal. But if you look at the medieval Sant literature of the saints, Radha has become such an important character that in some sects you do not get access to Krishna without permission of Radha. Now, how did this Radha, was she a historical person? I don't know. This is my theory. Radha is entirely a projection, a contribution of the consciousness of a long line of darkness. God can be created through your consciousness, and Radha is this creation. And Radha symbolizes now for us that extreme, absolute capacity to surrender oneself to the Lord. That is the Radha. You don't have to. You see, it's very beautiful. Aurobindo says, in Christianity, even in Time magazine, there was a feature article some 4 or 5 months ago about the historicity of Christ. Whether Christ existed, all these stories are true or false. He says, Aurobindo says, for us in India, whether Krishna existed or not is of no importance at all. He says, I do believe there was a historical Krishna. But that doesn't either make him a reality or unreality. Krishna consciousness, the consciousness called Krishna, the consciousness called Radha is still available for us to reach, to contact. And if that is a reality, nothing really matters. If Christ consciousness is real, is living, and if you read the lives of Indian saints, many saints have said, those particularly on the path of bhakti, that the first vision they had was of Christ. The first spirit that met was Christ. So for us, Christ is a reality. We never ask the question, where did he live? Where did he take his bath, or where did he go for his studies? We don't ask this question. Christ for us is a reality, is a consciousness. And so, all these are matters which the human being creates. God also is created by human beings, and therefore we make gods in our own form and in our own shapes. And that is why Greek gods have jealousy. Greek gods kidnap the wives of someone else, because this is all human beings do, and we think our gods should also do this. This is the secret of this relationship, and ultimately, therefore, all metaphysics that we talk about has to make a concession to the human language, and therefore, as you see here, he plays hide and seek with his own force, and that force has to be feminine. In nature's instrument loiters secret God. in nature's instrument. Man is a nature's instrument. Man is produced by nature, has always been emphasizing. We are a part of Prakriti. But in this production of nature, God secretly loiters. The immanent lives in man as in his house. And God is living in our house, in this body, so happily, as if it is natural to him. The immanent lives in man as in his house. He has made the universe his pastimes field. The entire universe is a club, is a playground in which the Lord plays, Lord sports in the entire universe. The immanent lives in man as in his house. He has made this universe his pastimes field, a vast gymnasium of his works of might. He has made this a vast gymnasium. He goes there to have his workout. God goes to the universe, the daily workout. All the stars, the sun, the thunder, lightning, all these things that you see are a manifestation of his exertion in this vast universe. All-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. God is all knowledge. But when he becomes man, he accepts our ignorance. Divine, where shapes of animal or man. He is divine, but he has no hesitation in becoming a pig, in becoming a dog, in becoming us. That was the problem that Christians had. When Darwin said man came from the monkey, they felt very, very unhappy. For us there is no unhappiness. Why should not God come from a monkey? Because monkey also is a representation of God at certain level. All this universe is God. Hanuman, as I was saying the other day, is our God. So God, who is formless, we say on the one hand God is formless, but every form in this earth is a form taken essentially by God. And so he is animal, he is man. Therefore he says, divine were shapes of animal or man. Eternal, he ascends to fate and time. Although God is eternal, he subjects himself to the rigorous laws of fate and time. We, you and I, after all, who are we? Essentially, who are we? We are the Lord, the God himself. But when we become human, we have submitted the laws of time and the laws of fate. We have limited ourselves. Immortal dallies with mortality. Dally? Play. Although he is immortal, he has come into a world where he has to play with mortality. The all-conscious ventured into ignorance. The all-blissful bore to be insensible. Incarnate in a world of strife and pain, he puts on joy and sorrow like a robe and drinks experience like a strengthening wine. For God, who is growing in you and me, all experience is like a strengthening wine. You just imagine having a complete meal which consists only of sweets. Will your tongue be ever satisfied? Just sweets. After 2 minutes you will say, I don't want anything more. You want other things as well. A little savory thing, maybe a little mirch somewhere here and there. That makes the meal more satisfying. So for the soul's growth, all these experiences God takes and he says, drinks experience like a strengthening wine. He whose transcendence rules the pregnant vasts, prescient now dwells in our subliminal depths, a luminous individual power alone. God, who occupies the entire universe, who goes beyond the universe, he also lives in the heart of each one of us alone. So, in the Indian tradition, We talk about God, the individual, the universal, and the transcendent. All this is God, and He lives in us alone. The same God fills the entire universe. The same God overflows, goes beyond the universe, and we call Him the transcendental God. The absolute, the perfect, the alone, has called out of the silence His mute force. You see, science talks about the Big Bang. Now if you ask science, 15 billion years ago the Big Bang took place, what exactly was happening 15 billion 3 years ago? Scientist tells me, please don't ask me, I don't have any answer to this question. After that, what happened, I can tell you. Before 15 billion years ago, don't ask me, I can't answer this question. Now, in the Vedas, there is something called Nasadiya Sukta. There, the creation of this world is described. They say, before the world the world was created, there was neither being nor was there non-being. You see, there was no being, that is, there was no world before this creation came about. So does that mean there was a big zero? No. Neither was there non-being. Now if there was non-being and being came out of non-being, then you have to say something came out of nothing. How can something come out of nothing? So they don't want to say there was nothing. Their way of saying this is, there was the whole universe, but it was unmanifest. You see, ultimately when the Big Bang took place, what happened? Manifestation took place. Truth was there in whatever form there was. And the Vedas very beautifully describe it. There was no being before the world was created. Because if already there was a being, then what was created? You can't say the world was already there, so you can't say there was a being. Nor can you say there was non-being, because if there is non-being, how did being come about it? So what they are saying is, there was a world, there was everything, because everything is in God, but it is unmanifest. Now this is the way our Vedic seers handle these problems, and that's why he says, He has called out of the silence His mute force, the Shakti, the Parashakti, which is the executive power of the Supreme, was lying in silence, and when the Supreme decided to create, He calls forth His force. Where she lay in the featureless and formless hush, guarded from time by her immobile sleep, the ineffable puissance of His solitude, the absolute, the perfect, the alone, has entered into His silence, into space. He has fashioned these countless persons of one self. It's very interesting. Very often my rationalist friends ask me, Sir, if you look at India's population exceeding 900 millions, and suppose you believe each person has a soul, so there must be 900 million souls, right? Now, where are these souls stored? Is there a storage capacity? Now, suppose another 600 millions are added. Where will they come from? All these days, where were they? When the world's population was half the present population, 1/3 of the present population, where were these souls? And it's a very interesting mathematics. There are 900 people. How many souls are there? The Indian spiritual tradition will say, one soul. How is it possible? One soul, 900 people, and each person has to have a soul? You see, our idea of a soul, generally speaking, if you really look at it, is like that of a locket. We all have little lockets hanging. So soul must be like a locket, and that locket must be in our heart. That's what we think. Soul is not a finite, tangible thing. And therefore, since it is not a finite, tangible thing, the question of storing it doesn't arise, the question of multiplying it doesn't arise. So three souls together make how many souls? One soul. Now in Aurobindo talks about it beautifully. He says there is a logic of the finite and there is a logic of the infinite. For those who understand only the logic of the finite, the logic of the infinite looks like magic. But it's a separate kind of world. There are separate rules that operate there. And as you know, even modern physics, that they are now saying, the laws that govern galactic physics, the physics that governs the galaxies, and the laws that govern the subatomic world are different from the laws that operate in the intermediate region. So you need a different physics for galactic physics when you talk about galaxies. And similarly, you need a different physics when you talk about subatomic world. Similarly, there are different kinds of logic. You see, the point, the mistake we make is what we do not understand, we think doesn't exist. It can't be true. Why can't it be true? Because I don't understand it. I don't understand God, so God cannot exist. It's like saying, you see, we have a range of receptivity. Below certain decibels, we can't hear a sound. If the frequency is above a certain decibel, again we can't hear a sound. And therefore, since I don't hear it, I say the sound doesn't exist. This is the tragedy of the human mind, the human intellect. It says what it can understand alone exists. If it cannot understand it, it doesn't exist. And therefore, Aurobindo himself says that at the level of the human mind, the ultimate truth, the final truth is to say, I do not understand reality. And if you say this honestly, you become an agnostic. And agnosticism is the highest mental state. It's an honest man's proposition. He doesn't say truth doesn't exist. All that he says is, at my level, I am incapable of understanding the truth. It may exist, but I don't understand it. Then comes the great Indian spiritual insight, which says, for understanding, mind is not the only instrument you have. The real instrument of understanding is your consciousness. Now, your consciousness now has been made so narrow, so personal, so egoistic, and therefore you cannot understand much through your consciousness. There is a way by which this consciousness can be purified, consciousness can be universalized, and if you do that, you understand